Hello. Thank you very much. So I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a therapist, and there's a lot of people that can speak about this subject much better than I can. But I will give you my experience in the psychedelic journey. And I just wanted to start by asking, how many of you have heard of the psychedelic renaissance? How many of you have had a psychedelic experience? All right, so this is a good audience. Maybe I can share something that can open something up. So very briefly about my background. I grew up in Sweden in a business family, and as the third child, I took my duty as becoming the black sheep and the rebel of the family very seriously, and wanted to break away from business and finance and all of that, and ended up working in an NGO for 5 years. It was working in with youth, 13 to 19-year-olds, and really helping. It was about 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Helping people to transition from a antisocial behavior, eating disorder, anxiety, depression, whatever was a challenging aspect of your life, and finding people that could help facilitate that transition, someone who had done the journey themselves. And I loved it. It was an amazing experience, but after 5 years, I ended up sitting with the Excel sheets and the sponsorship relationships and the funding applications, and I wondered, how did I end up here? And then I realized, okay, I just have to accept that this might be my contribution at the end. So I studied finance and studied business, and ended up working in banking. And what was really interesting about that experience was I came from a very purpose-driven life into a very commercial life all of a sudden. And I didn't notice the transition. I felt like I'm just Kristian, I'm the same person. I still have a big heart and I still care, but then I had a psychedelic experience and I realized how quickly things have changed. And I had my first psychedelic experience when I was 18, 19 years old, and it was in Koh Phangan in Thailand, and it was not therapeutical, it was recreational, but I had this moment when I was standing on a mountain looking out on the ocean, and I had this feeling of being wise like an 80-year-old monk and excited as an 8-year-old boy at the same time, and it was just the most extraordinary feeling I had in my life. And I didn't reflect much on that, except that, together with some friends, we went out in the archipelago outside of Stockholm and took magic mushrooms and walked around in nature and had a good time. And then it disappeared from my life for about 7-8 years, and then I had an experience with ayahuasca. And for those of you who don't know, ayahuasca is a psychedelic brew from the Amazon, and it's been used in native traditions for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And I was very skeptical arriving there. It was very formal, everyone dressed in white, there was a lot of rules, you need to do this, you need to do that, you cannot do this. They were singing all these hymns in Portuguese, I didn't understand anything, and there were a lot of references to Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ, and I was very confused, and it felt quite weird. And I was with my wife at the time there, or we just got married actually, yeah. And we were both commercial in London, lots of stress, lots of pressure, and a lot of tension, and we both had a bit of a weird experience. But I remember driving into town after that retreat, and I felt my wife sitting next to me, and it was just a different energy, a different frequency, and it was quite quite amazing. And then 1 month later, she was pregnant, and the next 9 months, I'd never seen her shine so much, and it was beautiful. And for myself as well, I started to unpack, like, wait a minute, started asking myself questions about, what's driving the decisions in my life? And I realized, wow, I left the bank 5 years ago, but I'm still running on that operating system. And started to go back into myself and ask myself, what do I really care about? What makes me happy? Which relationships makes me happy? And I started to observe a really positive change in my life. And then I got introduced to Amanda Fielding. And how many of you have heard of Amanda Fielding? She's a countess from the UK, and she started a foundation called the Beckley Foundation, and she's often referred to as the queen of the psychedelic renaissance. And if we just reverse a little bit, back in the 60s, psychedelic research was booming, and people realized that, wow, these substances that induce an altered state of consciousness seem to be able to relieve emotional trauma and states of depression and anxiety. And then came the cultural war in the US, and then the war on drugs. And pretty much from one day to another, all the research in this field stopped. And for decades, it was not touched. And it was basically a political suicide to even propose studying these substances because they were A, illegal, but most importantly, culturally inappropriate. But Amanda, she was determined to break this gridlock, and she managed to convince scientists at Imperial College in the UK to do the first psychedelic study since the ban since the war of drugs, basically. And let me see if I can get this one. And this, I don't know if you can see it here on the stage, on the screen. But this, no, the previous one. Yeah, this one. This one really blew my mind. And when they explained this study to me, it just made so much sense. And basically, the way that they describe it is that we have something called the default mode network, somewhere here in the brain. Stephen can talk better about this. And this is basically the conductor of the brain. And it's your accumulated learnings and experiences from life. So when you burn yourself, you know to not touch that again. And when you see that things are working, then you try to replicate that. And the way it was explained to me, which resonated, is almost like, we can see things, we can hear things, we can feel things. And when we receive this information, the default mode network will organize it, and then we will react instinctively to it. And what they noticed in this study was that the activity of the default mode network went down, and the connectivity in the brain went up. So on the left-hand side, you can see the placebo brain, and on the right-hand side, you can see the brain on psilocybin. And basically what it enables you to do is to make new connections in your brain, and almost like seeing things from the first time, feeling things as if you feel it for the first time. And I like to use this example of, you're 7 years old, you come back from holiday, and then everyone is asked to share what they did for their vacation, and you go up and you talk in front of the class, and someone makes a joke, and everyone starts laughing, and you feel horrible, and you walk down, and then you say, no, I don't want to talk in front of people anymore. And then you start building a narrative of like, no, I'm not a good public speaker, that's not for me. And then 10, 15 years later, you don't remember that situation, but you remember this rule: I'm not a good public speaker. And it's not really because you're not a good public speaker, it's just that you had a traumatic experience and you don't want to experience that again, so you created one of these rules that then become a dogma in your life that is holding you back. And these psychedelic experiences can help break these patterns about our self-image and our instinctive reactions that are linked to previous trauma in your life. And I think another one that is quite consequential is this study. And this was using psilocybin for people suffering from treatment-resistant depression. So these are people who have been suffering from clinical depression for 18 years without a documented improvement. And this is what the outcome was. And basically, the bar on the left is the current state of measuring depression. And then you see here that 1 week after, there was a significant improvement. And this effect seemed to last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, even out to 6 months after just one psychedelic experience. There was still a meaningful improvement for a meaningful amount of people. And when we talk about treatment resistant, that means that they have tried everything and nothing works. And you get this type of result. And this hit like a bomb around the world. And on the back of that started this wave of research called the psychedelic renaissance. And now all of the leading institutions of the world are studying this topic in many different contexts. And you have a range of companies that are trying to take these psychedelic substances through clinical trials to arrive at a place where this becomes a regulated, safe, and available treatment option for people who are suffering with mental illness. And this really inspired me, and I decided to put a lot of time and energy into this space. And I've been working with Amanda since then to try to put one of these companies through so we can arrive at a place where psychedelics can be widely available in a safe format. There's a lot to say about this topic, but this was just the introduction, and now I'll let Nina moderate where we go from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was just wondering, did you make those butterflies happen? Was that you? Is that you and your sixth sense?
Divine
Please join
intervention.
us.